this book has come from my first-hand reporting experiences because as an independent journalist, I have been traveling across the country and trying to document and more than document to just understand what was driving the hate crimes that we've been seeing all around us. I grew up in a very different India, and what I now see, which is these violent outbursts of religious hate. For me as a journalist, I wanted to understand, that this country had fundamentally changed, and to engage with that change was essential for me to understand what was happening. And that's honestly how the book came about. It came about when I was in a small town in Jharkhand called Gumla, and I figured how a hate crime, a lynching, that had occurred, for Muslim young man being lynched by a group of Hindus who were actively participating in a Ram Navami procession in the town. That sort of drove me to understand, drove me to just sort of try and figure for myself what was happening. And I found that there was popular culture which was driving some of this, at least, or it was being successful in radicalizing people, and ultimately driving them to sort of look at violence as the answer. So that is how the book came about. And what I did end up doing was that, I didn't want this to be a book which was just trying to sort of look at it from the outside. I wanted to go deeper and deeper as much as I can. So what I did was I tried to select three people, three quote unquote pop stars, as I call them, who were people who were basically extremely popular in their format of popular culture. And all of them had a common function, which is to push Hindutva as deep as they could, into rural and semi-rural India at that point. So the three pop cultures that I looked at were music, poetry, and literature, and publishing. And what I thought would be the best way to get into is that I pick these three people who are at the top of the game in each of these segments. And then I just spend time with them. I try and sort of see firsthand what their motivations are, what sort of, what are the factors that make it possible for them to do the work that they want to. What is it that they truly feel about what they're doing? I mean, is this opportunism, or is this ideology at work? There were so many questions that I had, and I felt that the best way to do it is just to tail them for close to 4 years, and go with them wherever they go. Talk to their family members, talk to people around them, and try and sort of chronicle all of that. So try and see a rapidly evolving India between 2019 and between 2024 through the eyes of these three characters, and through the intersection of pop culture and religious hate and hate crimes. So that honestly was the process in which the book's reporting took place, at least. I think what has happened in the last few years, as we've seen, the rise of religious hate and the rise of violence, which is linked to religious hate. Somewhere, and our analysis of it is very restricted to seeing this as the handiwork of political actors. We've always seen this as a response to the political mobilization that the BJP and the RSS and its affiliates have been doing. What I believe we've missed is that there's another element of it, which is that popular culture has now taken over that role in a very significant manner. Where what popular culture is doing is it's just seamlessly blending into people's everyday lives. It's entering their cars when they're going to work, and they're playing that music. It's entering their living rooms when they're sitting and watching these poetry performances. It's entering their bedrooms when they're reading these books. So, different aspects of an individual's lives now have Hindutva fueled pop culture as a very integral part. And then what that has done is that when popular culture can also be entertaining. So you are being entertained by while you're listening to this music, while you're listening to this poetry, but at the same time you're also being silently radicalized. There is an agenda that that this work carries. And you often think of these books to just be, or these songs to just be, an expression of sort of people's feelings, but there is a larger ecosystem at play which we often miss. And I feel like that in essence was what I wanted to try and capture, is that the power of popular culture can be so potent, that they can radicalize you, that they can entertain you, radicalize you, and drive you more and more towards hating people around you. And this is an aspect that I think our analysis has often missed out on. So, essentially, it's really looking at how that process takes place, and making somewhere people also more circumspect about what they're consuming. The book came out in 2023, and the book started in 2019 when I first saw this happening. And this phenomena that I call age pop, Hindutva pop, right, was at that point firmly a rural or a semi-rural phenomena, where this kind of poetry and music was extremely popular in so many different small towns that I would go to. In the 5 years that we are now here at, the book has traveled, and I have traveled, and I've reported about the book, but so has H pop, because now what I see is no longer a rural, semi-rural phenomena. Now I see this to be playing around me, and I live in Mumbai. I see this playing around me in every festival there is. A few days ago, we had Ganesh Chaturthi. We had the festival of Lord Ganesh, and for those days, I could see the Ganesh pandals playing Hindutva pop music, which was essentially othering everyone who was not a Hindu and asking people to be vigilant about the enemies that Hindus face. I'm seeing this now when we're in the middle of Navratri, and I'm seeing that people are playing these songs in Navratri as well. So essentially, this popular culture has traveled that entire distance from being a rural, semi-rural phenomena, and being a phenomena which is only reserved for political occasions, to now being an integral part of festivals and everyday life in the lives of millions of Indians, be it in rural or be it in urban India. I think what has happened is, in the last 10 years or so, we've seen that social mobilization and the nature of what it means to be a good citizen has evolved drastically. And I think, I mean, this doesn't really directly respond to my book, but I think it's an important sort of context to have. Where we're seeing an unprecedented crackdown on civil society, we're seeing an unprecedented crackdown on NGOs and on other agencies which could have mobilized people for conversations on rights, conversations on livelihood, and so on. We're seeing those conversations shrink. We've seen the media and the role it plays shrink drastically. And what we are seeing instead is that there is now mobilization that is happening a lot more on religious grounds. And somewhere, as I said, there are visible actors, which are Hindu right wing organizations which do it. But then there's also the invisible side of it, which is where popular culture plays in, right? So the idea essentially is to create an entire sort of ecosystem where the message is reinforced by multiple actors to say that these are the issues that you must care about, right? Or this is how you must look at a certain issue. And H pop, the sort of the potency of H pop is such that no matter what issue comes to fore, H pop is very quick to sort of take it in and then spin a narrative around it, using poetry, using songs, using books. So you will find that H pop responds to everything that happens out there. It's not sort of being created in isolation. So essentially, mobilization on religious grounds then becomes a lot easier, and a lot more seamless. And what that does is that when you have a Hindu nationalist ruling party, what it allows the ruling party to do is to not get its hands dirty in trying to mobilize people directly through hate speeches and so on, because it's also bad for their reputation. So what it does is it allows HPOP allows the ruling party to essentially outsource the work of radicalizing, normalizing Hindutva and mobilizing people on Hindutva grounds to all of these celebrities and pop stars who are anyway big stars in that universe. And I think that essentially somewhere also tells you why you see a lot more of religion-based, mobilization in different places. Like in Himachal Pradesh, for instance, there is a photo that goes viral of a local shopkeeper who is making an animal sacrifice on Bakri Eid. And after that photo goes viral, the Hindus of the town sort of gather outside his shop and don't allow the shop to open, and they want to demolish his shop and so on. So now that is a very, very quick mobilization that has been triggered by one event. But there's a lot of messaging that has gone into it to make that mobilization happen. H pop, for instance, has continuously peddled this narrative that Muslims are slaughtering cows, the Muslims are out to get Hindus, the Muslims are inimical to everything that Hindus want to do in the country, right? So when there's radicalization to that effect, working continuously 24/7, 365 days, an event as small as this can also trigger a very big, very, very big and a major mobilization, and that is what we're increasingly seeing now. So I think the role that HPOP plays is extremely crucial to understand, which is why I felt that I think our analysis of what is happening in the country and the way the Hindu right wing is mobilizing would be incomplete if we don't understand the role that popular culture is playing. Well, so as far as the three characters of the book are concerned, we'd sent them advance copies, and sort of they did. I mean, they had no role in deciding what goes into the book, but they did get advance copies before the book was out in the market, and they'd all, of course, consented to the interviews. It was a very transparent sort of process where what we were essentially trying to do is tell them that I am chronicling everything that they stand for and everything that they're trying to do. And I come from a place of, or at least in the book, I come from a place of no judgment, which is to say that I am not going to allow the book to be, judgment on what you're doing. I want the book at this point to just chronicle everything that you're doing and add context and maybe fact check wherever necessary, but not to intervene and call you names and label you as communal and so on. I feel like that is not what a journalist should be doing at this point. I mean, I think sometimes facts themselves can be so powerful that you don't need to really, intervene and call them a certain way for the audience to know. So essentially, that was the conversation, and the consent was something that we were very particular about taking. When the book came out, of the three people, two people, two of them, Kavi Singh and Kamal Agne, who's the poet, the singer and the poet, respectively. I think both of them said that the book, looked like it was a fair representation of what they were. It didn't look like I had sort of had maliciously painted them a certain way, or I had misrepresented what they felt and what they did. The third person, Sandeep Dev, who is the publisher in the book, he had issues with the book because he has his own journey that the book has chronicled, from being a votary of the BJP and a very, very firm supporter of the BJP, to then being very disenchanted with the BJP and starting a far right Hindu organization that wanted to take on the BJP. So he basically, by the end of the 4 years that I was with, was extremely unhappy and extremely angry with the BJP, because he felt that the BJP was not doing enough for its Hindu voters. So he felt that by highlighting his involvement with the BJP, which was the case a few years ago, he said I was misrepresenting him. And he also felt that the book was unfair because it painted him to be a person who dislikes Muslims. His argument was that I publish all of these books, and the person who binds these books is a Muslim. So how can I dislike the books? How can I dislike the Muslims? And I mean, the book sort of captures his thinking in various ways, and you'll read it. But one of the instances, for instance, where I have quoted this in the book, is that when we go to a restaurant for a meal, he summons the manager to check whether the cook and whether the staff in the kitchen is Hindu or Muslim. And he wouldn't want to eat if it is a Hindu who's preparing the food, because if he wouldn't want to eat if a Muslim is cooking, because Muslims tend to spit in the food that they cook for Hindus. Right. So I have also captured moments like these, and he felt that, calling him a Muslim hater on the basis of this was unfair, to which I don't really know what to say. But as far as, the audience is concerned, what has been a bit of a surprise to me, to be honest, is that people had absolutely no clue that this is happening in the country. I think every conversation that I've had with a group of people, I would have 80 to 90% of the people coming up to me and saying that they had no idea that this kind of popular culture genres even existed, or there was an organized attempt to infuse Hindutva into popular culture. And for me, that is also disturbing, because I think that just shows how much we have failed in the media, and I consider myself to be foremost a journalist, and I take the blame onto myself as well, that we failed in trying to understand how Hindutva is really shaping the country in so many different ways, and what are the tools that Hindutva is using to reach people. The fact that people still don't know about this, 6 or 7 years after it has become a sort of a mainstay of popular culture in rural areas, is a very disturbing sign. And I think that is a realization that keeps coming back to me constantly, no matter what part of the country I'm speaking at. As I said, I think HPOP has become one of the primary tools of mobilization in the country at this point. Um, and as I said, it is doing so silently, right? So there are no bad actors here at all. It's just pop stars who are singing, who are creating poetry, who are publishing books, but they're all effectively doing the work of the BJP and the RSS and its affiliates, and making it so much more easier for them to be able to reach more and more people and convince them of the agenda. So they become very entertaining and very attractive foot soldiers for the Hindutva movement in this country. And this is a fact that we shouldn't be overlooking at any point at all, to understand why and how Hindutva is spreading right now. The other part that HPOP is also seeking to fill the void of is that we've seen, over the last, decade at least, that there has been a very serious crisis in the mainstream media about the media's credibility, about where they stand, and how much people really trust it, right? So what's effectively happening is we're seeing more and more people turning to a YouTube to be able to get their facts and their opinions and their analysis from. And what maybe you and I don't realize it, is that every time there's a big event that happens, or a big news event, people are no longer going back to the news channels or the newspapers to understand better, right? They're in that very moment turning to YouTube, and there is data to back this, and I've quoted this data in the book as well, that people are turning more and more to a YouTube to be able to search for what is happening. One thing that I realized about all of these pop stars, this Hindutva pop ecosystem, is that they're very adept at being able to use exactly this moment to be able to plant narratives in the minds of people. What people like Kavi Singh, the singer, do is that each time there is an event of significance, which can be spun to the benefit of Hindutva, they would do that, and they would do that so quickly that as soon as people are online trying to look for sort of anything, from analysis to opinions to just information about an event, when they search on YouTube, they would find HPOP. So they would find either some poetry being up there, trying to make them understand what was happening, or there would be songs that would be up there doing exactly that. The problem here is that they're not really talking of factual stuff. They're not talking of an impartial, objective analysis here. They're talking of how they see this through the Hindutva prism of things. They're essentially trying to spin the narrative in a way that people are again, sort of either attracted to Hindutva, or they end up attacking the same enemies that Hindutva considers enemies, which is namely Muslims and Christians. So more and more people are consuming, H-pop content, but thinking of it as some sort of a neutral content, which is essentially just informing them. And I think this is a key sort of change in how people are also making up their minds, consuming news, consuming analysis, and so on. This also then ends up being a very effective tool to build consensus among people about various things that are happening, right? We're seeing a recent example in the Waqf board as well, where the amendments to the Waqf Act, they are controversial because they are being opposed by people. But what I saw when I was reporting on HPOP is that this issue had been constantly spoken about by some of the lead characters of my book, through their songs, through their books, through their online videos, and so on, where the messaging effectively was that Muslims are taking over Hindu lands and Hindu temples, and we must do something to prevent it. So 2 years from that narrative constantly circulating online, we finally have the government coming in and proposing these amendments. Except that H-pop has effectively managed to reach millions of people and already build a consensus among them that this is of key importance. So H-pop is performing various functions here. H-pop is doing the dirty work without letting the BJP and the RSS get its hands dirty. H-pop is mobilizing people. It's silently radicalizing people and sort of driving them more and more to hating Muslims and Christians and anyone else it considers enemy. And H-pop is also helping see narratives which are finally able to build a consensus among people for what is essentially needed in this country. And I think these are all sort of very very dangerous signs for how our society is having more important conversations. It's having it on the basis of popular culture, which is essentially fueled by and tinged by Hindutva. It's not impartial at all, and this is something that people must realize at this point.